So I was recording my video for Top Mods the other day, and I got a little bit distracted by something. I was showing off a mod called Aerodynamic Physics, and I became completely obsessed with the re-entry mechanics. So today, you receive big explosions, and I get to talk about my hyperfixation for the week. So the basic gist is, I wanted to recreate that scene from Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin and Obi-Wan try and land a Providence, whilst the Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, who is secretly a Sith Lord, questions his life choices for the past 30 years. I wanted to do this using the Aerodynamic Physics mods and the Larger Explosions mods, but it doesn't quite go as I intended. So if I get into the cockpit of this Providence, I'm going to show you what the two mods look like with default settings. So if I start thrusting forward, you'll see we speed up to 150 meters a second, and I'm going to turn dampeners off so we don't slow down. And effectively, one of the first settings that we'll be looking at is that the Aerodynamic Physics mod sets the speed limit to 150 meters per second, which we'll need to change for reasons you'll see in a moment. So we should come in, you can see the atmosphere is approaching, and as soon as we hit the atmosphere, there you go, you'll see sparks come off the ship. So you can't really see the ship at the moment because it's engulfed in sparks. You can kind of see the outline at this angle. As you can see at the bottom, the heat level is increasing, and in a second you'll see damage start to happen. So here you go, you can see the front of the ship starting to get damaged. There's little explosions everywhere. It looks pretty good. I'm actually waiting for the big cone, there you go, to disappear, and you'll start to see blocks come off the ship. Oh, and I've been kicked out of the cockpit, that's fine. Explosions, all good stuff. Now, this is the part of the video where I'd love to say, oh, I think we lost something, and it's okay, we're still flying half a ship, but unfortunately, as you can see, we're very much intact at the moment. Now, one of the things you'll notice in the bottom left is that we've slowed down to 80 meters per second, and this is where the problems start to come in. Due to the way the Aerodynamic Physics mod works, when you're in space, there is no drag, so you're fine, you can go up to 150 meters a second, but when you hit the atmosphere, you start to experience drag on your ship, and you start to slow down. If you're above a certain threshold, you start to get heat on your ship, and that's where you get the re-entry sparks and the damage, but eventually you get slowed down to below that threshold, because the drag is effectively slowing you down. Now this would be fine, we still have a damaged ship coming in from space, but this is where things start to go wrong. Or in Space Engineer's case, pretty much normal. And touchdown. Yay. Yeah, when you hit the ground in Space Engineers, you kind of just come to a stop. You take a little bit of damage. Years ago, you used to phase through the ground, but that doesn't really happen anymore. Like I said earlier, I wanted to combine the Larger Explosions mod, which has an add-on called Kinetic Devastation. So when you hit the planet above the speed limit, you would have a really large explosion. The problem is, because of the way atmospheric physics works, when you hit the atmosphere, you slow down below 100 meters a second, so that impact never really happens. So basically, this has been my week of editing settings of the mod in order to make all of this happen. So if I reload the game, what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the speed limit to 1000 meters a second and show you the next problem I discovered. Because of the way the Aerodynamic Physics mod works, the amount of drag I receive dynamically changes with the speed limit. So whereas before I was burning up at around 100 meters per second, at 1000 meters per second speed limit, I'll probably start to burn up at around 600 to 700 meters a second. And like I said earlier, the kinetic devastation threshold for me to get big impact explosions is 100 meters per second. So in theory, I should be going faster when I hit the ground and create a big explosion when I do. But as I said, that's in theory, because in practice, that's not what happens. So let us thrust forward again. You'll see in the bottom left, we've immediately overtaken our speed limit of before, so we're now going 250, 300. I ignore the damage at the back, that's because thruster damage was on and I forgot to turn it off. I'll fix that for the next one. So in momentarily, we should hit the atmosphere. You can see on the, oh, there you go, straight away. We're burning up immediately. And here's where the problems start to arise. Oh, let me go back into, there you go. So you can see that pretty much the entire ship is disintegrated there. This looks like a scene out of Transformers. That's because whilst increasing the speed limit lets us go faster and also lets kinetic devastation work, it does create a new problem, which is that our ship is moving 1000 meters a second and bits are breaking off the ship and also hitting our ship at 1000 meters per second, creating the explosions that we wanted to create when we hit the ground. In fact, the only piece of the ship to actually survive is this little bit here. The entire rest of the ship was completely destroyed. Now what I can do is I can reduce the speed that the explosions happen at. So by default they're over 100 meters a second. So what I can do is decrease that to 50 meters a second and then reduce the speed back to 150. But this has its own problems as well. Effectively what I've been trying to do is make it so enough of the ship survives when falling from space, but it's also moving fast enough when it hits the ground to do a big explosion. So as you can see, 150 meters in the corner and we'll hit the atmosphere momentarily. So you can see we're now sparking. And momentarily we should start to see damage. And I've been kicked out of my cockpit, always good fun. And this is the problem. Because explosions happen at 50 meters a second, and my blocks are hitting my own ship at 50 meters a second, we start to hit big nuclear explosions on our ship. Now, it doesn't actually seem to have affected it that badly this time. Oh. Oh. Okay, never mind. Oh, I think we've lost something. In a lot of my testing, we would lose like half the ship in nuclear explosions, but actually quite a lot of it survived this time. The real question is, how fast will we hit the ground? Which might take a while, because we're only moving 70 meters a second. Look at this debris field up here. Okay, this is pretty cool, not gonna lie. This reminds me of when I used my Death Star in the original video I did, and there was just an entire Death Star debris field above the planet. So momentarily we will hit the ground, and we're doing just above 50 meters a second. So we should get this Kinetic Devastation explosion when we hit the bottom. Here we go. Yay. Oh yeah, so the explosions are proportional to the speed you are going and the size of the ship, and unfortunately we were only doing 50 meters a second, which means it was a very small explosion. So not only does it do more damage to the ship, it still doesn't have the intended effect I want. Look how much debris there is. Okay, this is pretty cool. In my testing, I went to 250 meters a second. I found that was a good speed to do it at. And what you can also do is you can increase the explosion size. So, whilst it only does a tiny explosion at 50 meters a second, if we increase the explosion size by 10 times, and then hit the ground at 50 meters a second, in theory the explosion should be 10 times the size. Most of my experimenting I've done at 250 meters a second, because you get this nice middle ground, but the problem still is the explosions. There you go, there's our big spark bubble. There goes the entire front of the ship in a nuclear explosion. Bearing in mind we're still at the 50 meters explosion speed. Yeah, it kind of ruins the ship before we get out of orbit. There's a nuclear explosion. Oh my god. That was quite a big one. This is the problems I've been dealing with all week. Cool explosions, but I want to explode when I hit the ground, goddammit. So, if I increase the explosion speed back to 100 meters a second, do that again. This is kind of the middle ground that I've got to. You still get some explosions when you're moving through space, but you don't get nuclear devastated. I will, towards the end of the video, throw some different ships down. I quite like throwing the Enterprise down from space, but it has an issue which I'll show you in a minute. And I will also link the blueprint to this Providence in the description for those of you who want it, along with all the other mods used. Here we go, we're back on fire. We should begin to see damage, as always, momentarily. So parts of it are starting to break off the front, and then the front of the ship disappears, and I'm about to get kicked out of the cockpit. See, I can predict it now, I've done it so many times. Oh, I think we lost something. Yeah, that's more like it. Not to worry, we're still flying half a ship. I wish the front of the ship survived a bit better. There's not much I can do about it. It's taking the brunt of the explosion. But this is kind of what I've got to. There is still an issue. We're below 100 meters a second, although we're actually speeding up. No, we're slowing down again. So if I pause momentarily, what I found you have to do in order to get the full effect is you get the re-entry and you turn off drag effectively. And now everything's speeding up again because there's no drag. So when we hit the planet, we should now see, and it's probably going to deafen me because it always does, a huge nuclear explosion. There you go. Although I would prefer a bit more of this ship survived. God, I'm so needy. As I mentioned earlier, I did a lot of testing with the Enterprise as well. One thing you'll quickly see with the Enterprise that is different about the Providence is that the Providence is actually quite aerodynamic. And the big problem with the Enterprise is it very quickly slows down because of how badly aerodynamic it is. You can see it's actually turning because it's so badly aerodynamic. This kind of stops. All the wind goes up against the bottom of the saucer and it stops. So you don't get the re-entry damage, and you also don't get the explosion damage when you hit the ground, because you need to be going faster than 100 meters a second to do it. It's very sad. It's very sad. What I'll do for you, I'll make it explode big, don't worry. I'll turn drag off. There you go. We're speeding up, boys. I don't like that it's pointing backwards, but whatever. Oh! It's just like the films. Just the saucer is left. Good times. I was gonna finish with the Enterprise, but I just remembered there's something else I want to throw at a planet. What's better than throwing your planet destroyer at a planet, am I right, guys? I don't think any of Starkiller Base is going to make it to the planet, I'll be honest. Starkiller is entirely hollow. There's the sparks, you can't even see. Yeah, it's just going to fall apart, I reckon. It actually looks pretty cool, not going to lie. With the little cone at the front. It actually is like perfectly shaped for it. Oh, that's a lot of lag.